Good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for the delay. Dear Alderman 25 held us up. So thank you very much for coming back to us half an hour later. Do appreciate it. So today's webinar is very much on the future features that have just been announced and actually available in beta for the Nebula platform. And what I wanted to do is just give people a very, very quick and brief 3-slide reminder of what Nebula is all about. So Nebula is one of the first small and medium-sized business cloud solutions that was launched by Zyxel just over 3 years ago. It's now a well-rounded platform that supports our security, our switch, and our wireless LAN products. More and more products are being added as time goes by, and a lot of the new products that are released are also Nebula Flex manageable from day one. So as I said, a quick overview. So essentially Nebula provides a centralized and unified network management platform for our products. So all the products connect into the Nebula Cloud, which is hosted on Amazon, and they're then managed from that cloud environment. So we offer zero-touch provisioning, simple plug and play. You scan the serial number or barcode into the device, from the device, register the device, and you're up and running. So there's no software or hardware on-premises controller required. All of the management software is essentially hosted within Nebula. Obviously, there's a small agent running on each of the devices, but as I said, no on-premise hardware controller is required. The solution itself, the basic solution, is free. You can upgrade to the advanced features that are provided by the professional pack if you require, basically. And you can manage Nebula via the Nebula Control Center, i.e. a web interface, and you can also manage it from within an app as well. And the app's available on both of the major Apple and Google platforms. As I said, this is the last of the simple overview slides. And this shows you the product sets that Nebula supports. You've got the security gateway, you've got the switching, you've got the access points, and obviously the Nebula Control Center GUI interface up here is what we're going to come to in a minute, and this is the new version of the interface. Obviously, the app is still available as well. So if you now actually get into the new features that are just been announced, we can expand the knowledge. So we are referring to it as the Nebula 8.1 release, and it literally has just come out in the last week. Some parts of the release are essentially a beta or gamma release, and we'll explain that in a minute. Other features are production versions, and they're already rolling out. So some of the features that are now on offer, there's a first-time startup wizard, which will help you do repetitive tasks quite simply. There's a brand new user interface, although all the components that are being managed are the same, but it's the user interface and the interaction between the user or the administrator that's the major change. We've also got this new feature called the Nebula Smart Engine, which is all to do with making regular tasks far more repeatable and simple to do. And the latest product that is now being brought into the Nebula Flex management portfolio is the XS3800 pure 10 gigabit switch. I'll come to that as well. So as you said at the beginning, what's actually new? So the user interface is probably the most obvious thing that the users and yourselves will see. Basically, it brings in quite a different usability and stylish interface. Obviously, the current Nebula interface has quite a black feel, if that makes any sense, in terms of, so sometimes contrast on people's monitors has been an issue. So this is a cleaner, newer style interface, which we're referring to as the Nebula 2 user interface. Another feature is the first-time startup wizard. So this now supports gateway configurations and allows the users to easily complete end-to-end network tasks with a few simple clicks. We'll explain that a bit more later on. Behind some of these features is this feature called the Smart Engine, and it makes it easier to correlate settings and events across the entire network. There's some additional functionality improvements that are coming on board. So starting from this release, Nebula users with the security pack, so that's basically the Nebula Gateway users, can also view additional usage information from a client point of view. So beforehand, it used to be a network-based overview. Now it will be, you'll be able to drill down to a per client point of view. And as I mentioned earlier on, there's a new switch member that's come on board as well, the XS3800. So the biggest change that you will notice is the user interface. So the user interface now, as it says, there's a look and feel change. Usability is being tweaked with a new user interface. I'll show you that in a minute. But there's an array of intelligent management and configuration, GUI configuration items that you can choose. So you can choose the kind of widgets and things like that that are on the management screen. So this is an initial slide showing you what the new user interface 2 looks like. It tends to be a lighter, brighter color. So upon login to the interface, you'll see how different it is. Whereas before you tended to have access points and switching and so on and so forth spread across the top, and you would work down from top to bottom. This time the gateway, the access point, and the organization is over on the left-hand side. So more of the screen can be given over to status information, graphs, drilling down into users, so on and so forth. So it's quite a pleasing user interface. Obviously, the best thing to do, and I'm going to show you how to do it in a minute, is just to go and use it and experiment with it. You can't go wrong. So how do you actually try out the new user interface? So if you log into your current Nebula Control Center account, what you will find at the top right-hand corner is there's a try the new Nebula beta button. So click on that button and the screen will refresh and it will come up within the new user interface. This is the new user interface. So if you want to go back during this management session, literally all you do is, as it says, you go to the top right-hand corner again and you click the Leave New Session. But as you can see, this is the look and feel of the new interface. Whereas before you had to choose your organization and site structure at the top, elements of that can still be chosen at the top, but you've also got a managed service and an organization and a site-wide option on the left-hand side as well now. The three key parts of any Nebula solution, i.e. the gateway, the switching, and the access point, are still there, but they're now more on the left-hand side. The dashboard is quite a bit wider now and consumes the remaining part of the screen. Obviously on the dashboard now, you can see access point status, client status, switch status, PoE consumption. Obviously this example hasn't got a gateway, but if you had a gateway, you'd see the gateway status, so on and so forth. So we're using a lot more of the screen to be able to allow you to drill down into each of the component parts of the solution on your site or your customer and so on and so forth. So we've tried to sort of change it from being a top of the screen to the bottom of the screen to being more from the left-hand side and then using the remaining parts of the screen. What I do need to point out, if you are concerned about trying the beta out, is that we've taken a playing safe mode. So when you log out from the Nebula, having switched to the new user interface, you will be automatically reverted back to the standard version. And when you log in again, you will have to reselect to use the new beta version of the interface. But settings that have been applied or changed whilst you are using the new beta interface won't be lost, you just won't be able to modify them. Obviously, as soon as you go back into the beta interface, you'll be able to change them and experiment with them. So the idea of this is to take a safe approach to getting people to using the new interface, using new interface improvements, editing things. Perhaps there might be a few small issues. We'd like you to feed them back to us. Obviously, then they'll be corrected. And then when we reach a certain point that we will call it production, we will remove this beta mechanism and then we will switch the GUI over to the new user interface 2. Obviously, the whole point of this is to absolutely play safe with all of our customers' systems and configurations. So I would emphasize, this is where we're coming from. The reason we've got this is to play safe so that it's always reverted back out to the current user interface. And then there will come a point in time over the next month or so that we will notify you and we will change over to the production mode of the user interface 2. At the moment, we currently recommend the Google Chrome browser. There are a number of issues which we've experienced with Firefox, particularly in some tables aren't correctly formatted. It's a Firefox issue, not a Nebula issue. So that's why we're saying and recommending Google Chrome, which is obviously from a standards point of view, you can't get better than a Google Chrome HTML5 standards type browser. So now I want to get on to some of the other subtle features that are within this new release. One of the things we've said at the beginning is a thing called Smart Engine. Unlike a lot of the cloud platforms, one of the advantages is repeatability. So something that you often do can be simplified, made repeatable, and less error prone. So a common example that we were asked for is when you go and create a new wireless network, which has its own SSID, which has its own associated VLAN, and obviously a VLAN on the gateway and so on and so forth. You used to have to go and configure all those constituent parts. Now, with the guiding wizard and the smart engine, you can create that network in far fewer steps, and it's guided through via a wizard approach, and it makes things far simpler, much easier. Another example of the smart engine is if you were to take advantage, for instance, of a PoE shutdown, that would effectively, in the past, indicate that an access point could have gone down. Well, now the reporting and status hierarchy will understand that you have used the PoE shutdown function to shut the access point down, and so the AP event down will be blocked by the PoE shutdown event. So all kind of just gradual, sensible improvements to make life easier. Functionality enhancements are also coming along. Obviously, if you've got the Nebula Security Gateway, obviously it comes with a Nebula Security Services package, and that comes with an analysis environment as well. With this release, Nebula users and Nebula administrators will be able to see the network usage down to a client level. So whereas before it's more of an interface or a network interface level usage analysis, now you'll be able to drill down to an individual user. You cannot see obviously what they're doing, that privacy is still maintained. But in terms of where they're going, are they going to Facebook? Are they going to the BBC News? Whatever it is, you'll be able to analyze at that level. So IT administrators will be able to, for instance, drill down, get more information on usage, potentially see certain specific behavior, see what has been blocked. Perhaps it's been genuinely blocked, or perhaps it's been accidentally blocked. Have you had viruses or botnets, so on and so forth? And you will be able to see where they happened, how often they happened, and you'll be able to see that going back over approximately 180 days. Obviously, this does require the professional pack license to be available and installed, but this is the kind of uplifted feature that these kind of professional pack licenses offer. So obviously, when you've got this greater analysis of what your users are doing, you can either modify your security policies, be it both from a network point of view or your HR policies. So basically getting the best out of your network, not wasting bandwidth, and making sure that the network is being used properly and correctly. Some other functionality improvements that were requested was to enable some older legacy clients. So some people refer to it as WPA1, some people refer to it as WPA2 mixed mode. That mode has now been put into the Wi-Fi configuration so that you can support legacy clients better within a Nebula wireless network. Another thing that's been requested is obviously the major cloud providers, particularly Microsoft Azure, that people wanted to use the Nebula solution to be able to create secure VPN tunnels into the Microsoft Azure environment, so that you can have support perhaps remote desktops, virtual PCs that are within and hosted within Microsoft Azure, and you can securely connect to them from within your office network. And the NSG can create that VPN now quite simply. There's also been additional improvements and additions in the IPsec VPN protocol suite, so that basically VPN clients can gain secure access to the corporate network via the Nebula Security Gateway. One of the things you said earlier on, and in general, we should point out that more and more products coming along will be introduced into Nebula, either as a Nebula Flex or a Nebula Flex Pro type environment. So one of the really good switches that's been out for a little while now is the XS3800. That's a full 10 gig aggregation switch, very flexible port offering. So you've got SFP pluses, you've got copper, so you've got it's a 1, 2.5, 5 gig and 10 gigabit switch, a great switch. That will now be manageable from within Nebula. So there'll be a free firmware upgrade. You can just upgrade to the XS3800, select Nebula Management, and off you go. Once the switch is registered with Nebula, you'll be able to manage it just as you would any other Ethernet switch. And obviously those links will all be 10 gigabit. So if you think about that, we're rounding out the whole solution set. You've got the 1 gigabit switches that you've already introduced into the system, so the GS 1920s, and then the NSW family of switches. Now we've got a 10 gigabit switch, which will be able to sit in the core of the network, really pushing data around. And there's some more features we want to go over to do with licensing. So if you've got a professional license, these are some of the additional higher value features that you will be able to get with that license. So some of it's to do with efficiencies of deploying multiple sites, repeatability. So as it says here, basically automated tools to help administrators streamline their processes. So if you've got a fairly regular type of multi-office environment, or perhaps a shared office type solution that you're creating, you can create simple configurations and you can then deploy them, you can back them up, and you can synchronize them. I'll explain that in a second. So one of the useful things is a feature called site cloning. So once you've created an organization and you have at least one site up and running, configured in the way that you want, when you need to create a new site under the same organization, rather than have to start from scratch, you can take the current site and you can use the site cloning tool to actually clone the site to a new site. So as it says here, this is particularly useful perhaps for a chain of franchises or stores and so on and so forth, where the actual logical structure of the network is the same at all the sites. So literally you create a site, clone it, and then all of the existing configuration is taken over from one site to the other site almost instantly. So less error prone, very efficient. We're not taking anything away from administrators, we're just trying to help in terms of efficiency, repeatability, and obviously the quality as well of the solution. Another thing that's very useful, and people have asked before, as it says here, contrary to the AP and gateway settings that are mostly site-based, sometimes obviously the switch settings can be very device-based. So what the switch cloning tool allows you to do is to replicate the switch settings from between the same model devices across different sites. So that is after the new sites have been cloned by using the site cloning tool, which we mentioned earlier, users can proceed with the switch cloning. And what the switch cloning tool does is it lives under the organizational configuration tab of configuration management, and it allows users to easily copy the existing switch port settings to the newly installed devices in the new sites. But also, when there is a change in the settings, you can leverage this feature to replicate the changes to all the devices across different sites under the same organization. This is just I couldn't fit it all on one side, so basically switch cloning continued. So what the tool allows you to do is it allows you to copy the following attributes between the switch models. So obviously switch port configuration, trunk links, spanning tree configurations and priorities. If you've got any mirrored ports for monitoring, that can be put on there. Obviously access control policies can be brought over. Things like PoE schedules, sensibly brought over, and multicast configurations are brought over as well. It's all part of switch cloning. Another thing that people perhaps don't realize and how useful it is, the professional license provides a backup and restore functionality. So once you've created your organization and once you've created all of your sites and deployed them and the network is stable, clearly you want to make a backup of all those settings under the same organization. So it's particularly useful perhaps when you're doing some major changes to the network. So prior to obviously doing the changes, you can go and take the backup, and that then goes and does a snapshot effectively, so that if there were to be any configuration mistakes and network performance was impacted or connectivity had been lost or whatever, clearly you can then restore those configurations back to the previously saved snapshot version and get connectivity and get features back online. As it says, the backup facility creates a snapshot of all the site settings and it stores it on the cloud, and you can have multiple snapshots. And obviously users can go in and they can restore from a particular backup on a per site basis. Another thing that is slightly unique is the switch backup. If you think about it, if you've got a switch completely configured and it was to fail, you can use the switch backup facility, which is similar to cloning, to get a dedicated backup and restore point of the switch back when your replacement hardware switch is shipped to site. So you can perform a backup of the original device before sending it back to the manufacturer, and then you can apply that same configuration to the replacement device as soon as you receive it. Obviously, that minimizes network downtime, because don't forget, the configuration of the network is held within the Nebula Cloud. It's not kept on the actual physical device anymore. In addition, what you can do, you can back up a switch from, so you can back up a particular switch, and then you can restore it to many switches for mass deployment. So if you know that you've got, I don't know, 4, 6, 10 switches that have got an identical configuration to roll out across a large office, you can configure one switch as you want it, check it out, and then you can restore it to the remaining 9 switches. So if you think how efficient that can be, it's a great improvement. Another feature is called configuration templates, and this is another tool that will help you maintain multiple sites automatically, and they can be automatically synced whilst applying setting changes to a master template. So once your networks are deployed, you can then create a template using one of the site's configurations, and that's your base template. And then you can bind all the other sites to that template. And then once the sites are bound, changes that you then make to the template will be automatically replicated to these sites. You can still have a local override option on the destination sites, so allowing you to update that settings and not overwrite the automatically template synchronized settings. That's how flexible it is. But in terms of efficiency, repeatability, it's a fantastic facility. One of the things just before we end is I just wanted to just remind people of what the product portfolio is. Obviously, we've got Nebula, Nebula Flex, and Nebula Flex Pro. So the Nebula column, Nebula devices, are devices that are only manageable by the Nebula platform. They tend to be the NAP access points, the NSW switches, and the NSG security devices. Nebula Flex devices can be managed via a standalone web browser, or they can be managed by the Nebula. So you've got access points like the NWA 1123 range, and then you've got smart managed switches like the GS1920 and the XGS 1930. The Nebula Flex Pro range basically is standalone managed, or it can be Nebula managed, or it can be on-premise controller managed for access points. So that's things like the NWA 5123 or various WAC access points. And obviously now, we've just mentioned earlier on that the XS3800 has joined the Nebula Flex family, and that comes when you enable it for Nebula management. It comes with a 1-year professional license included. The other thing I wanted to just remind people of, obviously, one of the great advantages is that there's an app to do Nebula management. So you basically create yourself your Nebula account, install the app, and then you can go and either you can create your organizations and sites within the app, or it will obviously bring down the configuration from the Nebula Control Center. So you can keep an eye on things. Very easy to install devices. You scan the QR code from the new device, place it within the appropriate organization and site, power the device up, wait a few minutes, and then you can be able to go and manage the device. As simple as that. You can change the Wi-Fi settings easily. So things like creating new SSIDs or changing passwords, very easy to do within the app. So obviously, wherever you are in the world with your phone, as long as you've got internet connectivity, you can make these changes. There's a nice dashboard so you can monitor traffic summaries, and you can see the status of access points. You can get alerts. You can see how many clients are connected. All the kind of management and then basic day-to-day administration and configuration that you'd like to do. Very easy to do, literally within the palm of your hand. You can do VPN connections. You can look at the managed service provider portal, so you can create new structures for organizations and so on and so forth. And one of the, obviously, the very useful things is you can get push notifications. So if you've got an issue with an access point goes down or a switch goes down or whatever, you can be proactively alerted to those kind of failure modes. Absolutely, yeah, brilliant. Literally, it's mad. Wherever you are in the world, you can manage your Nebula network. Obviously, the presentation gets sent out afterwards, so thank you very much for signing up. So what I've done is I've put some useful links that give you greater detail into what I've been talking about. So there's much more detail about the user interface too within the Breath of Fresh Air link. There's some more detailed information about this new release and where we're coming from under the Nebula new release first link. There's a very interesting article about building and managing multi-site networks with ease in much greater detail under the building and managing multi-site networks link. Then there is a set of release notes that you can link to from the Nebula Control Center. So that is a statement basically of the entire release, and that also applies to the security gateway, so you can see extra features that have been provided for by the NSG features. And that's it nearly. So if there's any questions, if anybody's got any questions, or if there's any chat, let me have a look. If you can let me know. Oh, Adam's just said thank you very much. It's great to see. Thank you very much. So if there's anybody else, I'll stay on for a few minutes. Thank you very much for attending. I do apologize that we were half an hour late. No excuse down to the M25, but we were just held up. So thank you very much for coming back, and appreciate your attendance. Thank you very much, everybody. So I think I've answered most of the questions that have come in. Obviously, there will be a recording of the webinar sent out. A number of people have mentioned about slides. We can get some slides to you. Anything you need, just you can email me on nigel.canning, C-A-N-N-I-N-G, @zyxel.co.uk, or just ring into the office and ask for me, and we will get you hooked up. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon. Cheers. Bye-bye.